Let's get into it. 1, 2, 3. Let's get some more. Have it in. Get some more. Just get some more.
Why, hello, and welcome to My Whiskey Den, your favorite public access whiskey review show where craft whiskey is king. And we are happy to have everyone with us this evening. Everyone in the chat as well, too. We have Mike, we have Mitch as always, and we have Paul with us from MB Roland. I am really excited to talk to you because, we've been tasting some of your products over the last couple of weeks. Mitch put us through a wood tasting basically, and we had the corn whiskey last week and the blind tasting, and we've all had this lovely thing, but it did show up in the mail. And this dark fired whiskey, as everyone knows, is one of the first American smoked whiskeys that I had that I thought really kind of put American smoked whiskeys like in the map, or started putting that in there compared to scotches and other things that had that type of flavor. I just thought it was something that had like a neat American twist on it, and a cool way to get there. But before we go any further, Mike, do you want to tell everyone about the Bar Card Co-op?
Oh, I would be happy to tell everybody about the Bar Card Co-op. So get the clicker ready. At least I didn't forget my password like somebody else. All right. The Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who create content for the whiskey and other distilled spirits public. Bar Cart YouTube and Facebook pages have information about upcoming shows, which they do a special one every quarter. They've done blind tastings, distiller panels, discussions of collaborations, and usage of unique grains. Along the lines of our group here, we got Distillers Talk, which is the oldest of the shows on there. New shows arrive at the end of the week. It's a conversation with people from distilleries and distillery adjacent, and it really gets into the weeds with their interviews. If that's not nerdy enough for you, Alan has One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, where this show is where he answers your questions, and any of your questions about distilling, he puts them to the test, which is he'll do grains, mash bills, equipment, methodology, and new episodes come out very randomly and sometimes very frequently. So make sure that you subscribe to that. The silkiest voice on the internet. It's a Bourbon Turntable, where they mix the love of whiskey with the love of music. There've been a lot of great episodes with musicians, writers, distillery folk, and big two-parters with people like Todd Leopold and Nancy Fraley. And there's another two-parter they're in the middle of right now with Steve Gorman, former drummer of the Black Crowes. So yeah, it comes out Wednesdays on all of your possible streaming services, including YouTube. And then if you want to really get into it, Alan also does If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything, which is a show about spirits and the paranormal and the unexplained among us. And they do get into some good stories about there's apparently a lot of hauntings and ghosts and other unexplained things around distilleries. So they get into that show, and that is on Spotify, and they are in season 3 right now.
All right.
That's a lot.
That was a lot. And thank you for sticking with us through that. But
thank you for enduring that.
But Paul, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. We're really happy to have you here. I usually like to take kind of a little bit step backwards before you got to the distillery and working on that. What were you? Was there any spirit that kind of caught your eye before you started a distillery, or when you were younger? And I was gonna say, let's start with that one. Sorry. Was there a spirit that ever like clicked when you had it that was like just kind of sent you in the path of wanting to be a distiller?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to commend y'all on your opening music. By far the best opening music of any show I've ever watched or been a part of. Reminds me of New Orleans, and that's where I'm. That area is where I'm from, so it's kind of nice. Uh, but the actual kind of impetus as far as drinking and consumer interest, where that started with me, was ironically Scotch, and it was more of my brother and I pouring a glass, enjoying it, and kind of being adults together when we were in our super young 20s. And we were both in the military at the time. I was visiting him, and we were buying a lot of duty free whiskey, at very low prices. And I just started looking into how the stuff was made because I was enjoying it. I didn't even know at that point that whiskey got its color and flavor from aging in a barrel. And the more I read about it, the more I was fascinated. Was my making sure my internet's behaving. Sorry about that. But we were at I got stationed here at Fort Campbell, which for those that don't know, it's near it's on the hugs the Kentucky-Tennessee state line, about 45 minutes northwest of Nashville, up I-24. And kind of said, well, I'm in Kentucky. I should probably get to know and get to love bourbon, and started just trying to get interested in it. And once I started buying bourbon, especially at that time, it was a fraction of the price if you're buying from malt Scotch. So I said, man, this bourbon's awesome. It's way better than Scotch because I can get a lot of different things for a really reasonable price. I think back then you could get Blanton's for less than $50 and stuff like that. But anyway, got really interested in the prospect of just how whiskey was made, and kind of got this bug of, well, there's a lot of small breweries. I grew up kind of watching those grow and evolve. And I kind of looked at it as distilleries at some point are going to do that. And there's a lot of reasons why it took longer and why it's evolved differently. But the whole whiskey side of things was just, I was fascinated by the process. I thought it was really cool. And the more that I've done it and do it, I kind of equate it to kind of rolling together a bakery and a family farm is at least our environment here. So I've always been a fan of baking. Ironically, I used to help my mom in the kitchen and stuff like that here and there. My mom was such a good mom that she actually loaned me to a baker a few times for some 3 a.m. shifts, and I actually enjoyed it. So it kind of all made sense for me. And the hardest part, of course, with any distillery or whiskey business is, what do you do as far as the juice goes, in aging and all of that. So that's really been our biggest process, is growing what I like to call the Ponzi scheme, because that's what you're doing when you're filling whiskey barrels. You're running a Ponzi scheme.
We take some questions from the chat, and before we go too far, I was going to ask, obviously, what you were doing before you were in the military. What branch were you in?
I was in the Army, Fort Campbell, which is the home of the 101st Airborne. I was in the 101st Airborne. We've also got a few other wonderful units here. 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the 5th Special Forces Group are all based here as well. And it's frankly, if you've been in the Army, it's one of the best posts you can go to because of the location, the central location. You've got amenities here. We're on the countryside of the state line. Kentucky tends to be a little bit more rural and agricultural on our side. Our county's got maybe 75,000 people, but you go literally a couple miles that way to Tennessee, and Clarksville, Tennessee is the 5th largest city in the state of Tennessee, and it's probably going to surpass Chattanooga in the next few years. It's just booming and growing with all this Nashville growth. And so, we're kind of on our own little spot over here in Western Kentucky. We're in the central time zone, so we're in, y'all's time zone.
That's awesome. Sorry, Mitch. Sorry, we make fun of those
distilleries in my state, and it's like the furthest one from me. It's so annoying.
It was worth the trip. So, and apparently there's some chatter about some cinnamon rolls you make as well too. It must be fantastic.
Yeah, they're good. That's like my practice to keep my yeast managing skills up.
Right. So, was it just you that wanted to start a distillery, or what transpired to make you want to start a distillery? You were looking towards making some unique stuff, but who else was all on board with it? Because it's a big step to make that to open a new distillery, and you guys have been around quite a while, so it was around that time where you guys were kind of forging the way with things. Or at least taking the brunt of some of the early years of stuff, especially before now where you guys can ship a lot more easily. Kind of going through that stuff, but who else was all on the team early for you when you started the distillery? And was there a moment that it clicked? It was like, this is what I want to do now. Excuse me.
Well, we had a pretty good idea of what we wanted to do, and as far as we wanted to do something very small and manageable. And what ended up happening was we got a really good opportunity on a piece of land, which is where I'm at now, where the distillery is. It was an Amish dairy farm, and there's quite a bit of Amish population in this area. They all kind of came into the area mainly in the 90s as their land values in Pennsylvania became a little bit too astronomical. And so there's a certain, different types of populations, Amish versus Mennonite. I'm not going to get into all that, but these were standard Amish that, have the horse and buggy, if you will. And they had a disagreement with their congregation, and they decided to leave with a few other families and form a new congregation. And so they sold their property, and they had to sell it to the outside community outside of the Amish. And I happened to have been talking to the real estate agent that they were using, and he's looking at the property and the buildings, and he's sitting there going, this is exactly what we need based on what I've told them. We need to have a tasting room. We need to have a place to produce. We need to have some storage for barrels. And so we ended up figuring out a deal that would work. And it was a big enough chunk of property and money for us that we said we need to start this business now and figure out how to make it make money. Because the initial plan was, let's buy a few acres. We could sit on it for a few years, develop the business, do whatever we're going to start it comfortably or more comfortably. And that didn't happen whenever we went with this plan. But the location is proven to be very good for us. We're really close to I-24. Told you, location wise where we are as far as proximity to Nashville, and we're a few hours from the Bourbon Trail proper. That's Bardstown and all that stuff, but we're still accessible. And it's just been a good kind of growth process, but it took a bit to make it all work. We started with a little 100-gallon still, and when you don't understand the business or have the capability to look 20, 30 years in the future with something like this, you're thinking 100-gallon still, that's amazing. We'll make so much liquor and juice and whatever we got to do and fill a few barrels and it'll be great. And then you realize the issues with a 100-gallon still. But the other side of that is we told ourselves we do not want to source product, because at that time, that was when a lot of folks were starting to source product. And there was a lot more confusion with bottling and who's distilling, whose juice is, this kind of stuff going on. And we knew we wanted to make, or at least my business plan was always, I want to kind of make an old style of bourbon that had been essentially lost with Prohibition. And it's real simple. We just use local specific grains, and we're pot distilling, lower barrel entry proof, just basically the way that they did it back then. And the laws have changed and the processes have changed since then. And so as far as flavor, we knew we were going to make a very unique, distinct flavor that we could not just, do the little swap out one product for another if we're buying sourced whiskey from a large scale producer. So we ended up saying, okay, we're going to make our own juice and put our own barrels away, and that's how we'll grow the business. And 15 years later, we finally have a certain, little bit of whiskey, and that's what we're making now full time. When we started out, we were making a lot of unaged clear products to sell immediately, and they did serve us well, and some of them continue to. But we always wanted to focus on and make whiskey. And when I say whiskey, bourbon whiskey, get the idea.
So what's your, out of what your stuff that you make, what's your, I don't want to say favorite, but what's the thing that you enjoy making the most out of your different offerings? Well,
if you're asking a distiller what our favorite offering is to make, and I'm answering for the distillers, and as a distiller, it's probably the corn whiskey because it's a 95% corn mash, and it just behaves wonderfully when you mash it. There's no rye in there or wheat. There's no, gluten or glucan either way. Not that if you have a small amount of rye or wheat, it typically doesn't cause much issues, but especially if you're pot distilling, when you make a rye whiskey versus a bourbon, it's a little bit of a mental preparation you got to do to get ready for dealing with the rye sometimes. You can't put too thick of a rye mash or slurry in a pot still. Pot stills don't like that.
So along that theme, you talked about some of the things you've discontinued. What was your favorite thing that you discontinued?
Well, the stuff we've discontinued, we haven't really discontinued much. We have some unaged products that are not whiskeys, but whiskey-wise, pretty much everything we still make at least a certain amount of. There's products that we make less of now because we realize what we need to focus on. And the three primary products, or really four primary products we focus on now, is our standard bourbon mash bill, which has the rye in it, 17% rye. And then wheated bourbon, which that's the vehicle for Barker's Mill, of course. And then rye and corn whiskey. And we probably make more corn than we do rye at this point. It just from a popularity standpoint, which is kind of nice because the idea with making the corn whiskey was to resurrect that kind of style of product that the only remnant that there is from history at this point, or up until craft distilleries, is mellow corn. And that product used to have its own category, just like bourbon or rye, and a lot of players and a lot of options out there for people to try. So since we're using this local white corn, we knew we needed to make something that was going to be able to kind of encapsulate all of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we like about it, is having that unique flavor from a local grain, or not, like the standard number 2. With this white one or blue or what, you actually get to really feel how the corn itself can impact or torque a whiskey. And it's just neat to see how soft and how subtle things can be. And then, okay, how'd you come up with the idea to dark fire the corn? Sorry, I can't wait anymore. It's been sitting here, it's staring at me. I'm intrigued. How did you get to that?
Oh, we stole it.
Yeah.
No one has any ideas. You pretty much always are going to steal or redevelop someone else's. Well, kind of. If you ever come out to our particular area of Western Kentucky, as well as on the other side of the state line, but more so in Kentucky, but also a little bit in Tennessee, there's a few counties and we're kind of in the middle of it all, where dark fire tobacco is produced, and it's a unique type of tobacco. It's not the standard burley tobacco that's growing out in the fields for the most part in the Carolinas and other parts of Kentucky and so forth. It's a different varietal of tobacco altogether. To me, it looks a lot more exotic growing out there in the field. It's more of an olive color versus a lighter green color. It has a kind of jagged, leaf, so it looks almost like something that could be from South America or Central America. But that specific type of tobacco has been grown in this area, and it's more what's done afterwards, where that tobacco is hung up to cure and it's smoked in barns, and it's been done this way for I guess a couple hundred years at this point. And 90+% of all of this type of tobacco that's dark fired or grown is grown in these handful of counties right here in Kentucky and Tennessee, a little bit in Virginia too. Call it the 10%, but it makes for a very unique flavor on the tobacco, and it's like one of the most comforting things for people that are from this area when you have these smoking tobacco barns during the later summer and early fall, well, just into the fall actually, and you just have like bacon smoke in the air when you wake up in the morning from all these tobacco barns smoking. And we'll wake up certain mornings and just residual from barns down the road in different directions, you'll have smoke all over, and it just smells wonderful. And you can drive around out with the beautiful fall foliage and see these tobacco barns smoking. And I looked at that when I got to the area as an outsider. I'm from Louisiana originally. I do not claim to be a native Kentuckian. I like to think that I'm the one coming up from New Orleans to, help make the kind of bourbon that was sent down there to start everything. But the actual dark fired tobacco here is just so unique the way it's done. I said, why can't we kind of do that with corn, just the same way malted barley is done with the Scots with kiln firing? Because I was a big fan of, or still am, big fan of Islay malts and all of those very smoky, peaty scotches. And I knew it would make a different type of process because you're using hardwood as well as sawdust. And some tobacco farmers get really crazy and put molasses in their fires and stuff like that to make more sweet aromas. We don't do anything like that. We just use the hardwood and the sawdust. But you're building a fire in a barn with a bunch of tobacco in there, smoking it. We've got neighbors all around us that are farmers. I mean, we're the number one crop producing county in Kentucky. So we're a very agricultural community here in Christian County. And my neighbor across the street, Bubba Glass, I said, hey, Bubba, can I stick some corn in your tobacco barn and see what happens? And he's like, well, yeah, that's fine. So I made some racks with some screen and, some wood and everything, put it in there, and it was better than I was expecting as far as the result of the corn after we smoked it in there for about a week. And then we said, okay, now we got to figure out how to replicate this. And unfortunately, we still only have a very small capacity to smoke this. So we don't make a huge volume of the dark fired bourbon. We'll make more as time goes by, but it's one of those products where it's a whole added extra step smoking the corn. And we put it in the tobacco barn with the sawdust, with the wood, and we'll smoke it 3 different times for about a week. And it turns that white corn into a nice, kind of coffee color, coffee with cream color. There you go. and just a nice light tan color. And the stuff ends up I'm sorry to say I haven't made grits with it yet, and we should. But the stuff's too valuable because we want to use every bit of the dark fired corn to make whiskey. But when we make the whiskey mash for dark fired bourbon, it smells like biscuits and gravy in the distillery. It smells like a Cracker Barrel or something like that. It's phenomenal. You can always tell when we're cooking that specific product. And that specific mash has a third of it is dark fired corn. And the rest of it is still our 17% rye, and then we fill the rest with white corn and 5% malted barley. But that one, the unaged white dog or black dog is what we kind of have grown to call it, is very much like a mezcal when you taste it by itself, the white clear spirit. And then, of course, you put that into a barrel for aging, a new charred oak barrel, and it's just a crazy amount of competition of flavor between the sweet, vanilla, caramelized flavors you get from the barrel, as well as all the smoke. But it's a very campfire, hardwood smoke. You don't get peat. You don't get any of that iodine stuff that you get with a lot of the scotches. It's just that very specific kind of hardwood smoke.
So we've actually had not just the dark fired bourbon, but the dark fired whiskey, and then the black patch whiskey, which was like I think it was the 4th use barrel. Do you have fourth use? Do you have like a favorite one? Is it the bourbon? Is it like the 2nd use one? Is it the 3rd or 4th use barrel for the dark fired?
Yeah, on the dark fired whiskey, the only difference is dark fired bourbon is a 1st use barrel. The whiskey is a used barrel. So it's basically a sidestep from a corn whiskey because it's a 78% corn mash and it's a used barrel. And what we found in aging, we played with 2nd use barrels, 3rd use barrels, 4th use barrels, and so forth. There wasn't a whole lot of variation once you got to a 3rd use barrel. Even if I think we went all the way to a 6th or 7th use on certain barrels. And you get less flavor, obviously, but it was very similar as far as the flavor goes. And at this point, the dark fired whiskey is all in 2nd use barrels, and most of our 3rd use barrels are, by the time we get to using a barrel a 3rd time now, it's kind of a one-off experimental type of thing to see what happens. But, in Scotland, they use these barrels for decades. I mean, I've heard of barrels that are in use for potentially 100 years or more. And here in Kentucky, we pretty much just use it the one time. But there's a lot of good flavors you can get on some of these that might be on a barrel that's, pretty well spent in the world of Kentucky, but it's really not for making whiskey.
Excuse me. I know you guys were using white corn. Was that something you guys started using from the beginning? Or did you kind of like build it or develop that along the way, or was that like one of the first things you guys started using was the white corn you wanted to use?
All right, I'm going to flip a light on because I'm getting dark now. Sorry.
Oh, good.
I don't have
I wish I could be outside.
Mary Beth was supposed to be my audio-visual person. She got held up at a meeting. I grew up, again, in Louisiana. Did not grow up in a farming community, so I did not know anything about grain or farming when we're getting into this business. And I just basically started asking local farmers, what should I use, or what's the difference between this corn and that corn, and the corn the ethanol plant down the road's getting, what's that versus this? And basically through that whole process, I talked to our local granary 5 miles down the road in Pembroke, and he started saying, well, the moonshiners buy the white corn. And he kind of smiled at me, and I'm like, wait, what? They would say, well, you have white corn. Well, what do you mean by white corn? And he explained to me that the white corn that they have is a food grade white corn grown for food, and he sells pretty much all of it exclusively to food manufacturers, to grits companies, to Golden Flake, to tortilla companies, etc. So this is the same kind of white corn. So when we cook our mash and we put our corn in there, we're basically cooking a giant vat of grits, and it smells that way, that very sweet, more of a subtle kind of flavor compared to when I smell mashes with pretty much any yellow corn that I've been around. It has a much heavier corn, gamier flavor or aroma compared to our white corn. But I didn't realize it at the time that you can't just go to any granary or any community and say, hey, give me this great food grade white corn. I realized later on how much of a resource that it was having that here, and especially a huge volume. I mean, they've been having this supply and selling it like crazy on the market. So it's, we now buy a nice amount from them and we're a good customer, but we've worked up to that over the years. But white corn is always been what we've used for every whiskey, unless we're doing an experimental whiskey where we've done a few yellow corn mashes. And there's definitely a difference when we've done that for more or less comparison's sake. I mean, it's yellow corn has that gamier, more aggressive corn flavor, and ours is a little bit more subtle and softer to me compared to typical yellow corn.
Definitely.
All right. So, all right, I went down a month or two ago and did the kind of distillers tour that y'all do once a month, and he was talking about making brandy, and about how it is quite possibly the most hardest work for the least return that y'all do, because he says he brings down grapes with yeast on them, and that's how he ferments it, and then y'all put it in the still like that and maybe add some water. Is that like y'all don't smush them or anything before they go in?
No, he's probably being a little bit. That was Mike Bibb, our lead distiller, I'm guessing. Hold up, sorry if y'all are hearing stuff in the background. He was probably alluding to the fact that it's just, we got a process and we make whiskey, and we love making whiskey. And for any whiskey distiller, if you want to love making whiskey more, just make brandy from scratch. But he actually brings us the grapes in a fermenter, essentially already pitched, and we have to essentially watch the fermentation, and there's a lot of stirring involved because you've got all of this mass of grapes and everything that's in there that needs to be kind of moved around. And then when it's done, you get to put all that in the still. And of course, our pumps and hoses don't really like all this macerated grape stuff all in there. And then of course your yield a lot of times isn't the greatest, because this is a local former winemaker that kept some grapes going for us, and we get those grapes from him. It might be enough to make half a barrel. It might be enough to make 2 or 3 barrels. It just depends on the harvest for that year. But anything that stuff, because it's red grapes, it's like red wine. Anything that stuff touches, it turns purple or blue. And you got these stains that you're dealing with. It's all over the floor. If you spill something, it just messes with our rhythm. That's all. But we enjoy it because at this point we've got a good system with that gentleman. His name's Jim Brevard. He had a winery, a Brevard Vineyards and winery here in Christian County for several years, and he's got it now to where he just brings it to us. It's ready to go, and then all we pretty much have to do is put it in still. But brandy will make any whiskey distiller love whiskey a lot more.
So I started off with the 6-year used bourbon barrel brandy, and oh my god, it's so good. Also, I really want you to finish one of your dark fired whiskeys in one of these brandy barrels, because I can just only imagine how good that would be, and it's just a fantasy of mine.
Well, we've got a bourbon, I think it's a bourbon, aging in a brandy barrel right now, or finishing in a brandy barrel, way to say that. But that's not a bad idea, doing the dark fired whiskey in a brandy barrel. We're going to have to put that on the list, because that list keeps getting longer of finishings we want to try and things like that. That's starting to be a lot of the fun now, is, as we do start having a little bit of whiskey, and then we can do a little bit of finishing, whether it's a brewery or if we get something from a winery or something like that, there's just a lot of opportunity with stuff like that. We did we're about to bottle it, or I think actually it might be bottled already, but we did a corn whiskey finish in a Gosa. Is it Ghost? Ghost? I'm not a beer guy on the crazy stuff. Is it Ghost or Ghost? How do you say that?
I'm not a beer guy. You're not going to get me to know that.
All right. Anyway, it's like a sourish type of beer. I don't drink sours and I don't drink hoppy beers, but this was a fun and interesting one to do because the corn whiskey, of course, is aged twice. 2 different barrels, and then the barrel that we used, we gave to the brewery after we used it a few times. So then when we put it all back together, we put that corn whiskey to finish in this barrel. It ends up being the 6th aging or 6th barrel aging involved for the product to get to the final result. And some of this, we're just barely getting into this over the past, call it, year or so. So we're going to have a lot of fun stuff coming out over time as we play with this. And we're talking to a lot of our local brewers to, basically work up a deal where we can get a barrel give them a barrel and then get it back and finish whiskey in that, see what happens.
I like how you guys are playing with all sorts of different stuff. Okay, since these are your main mash bills between what you have, how often do you stray? Because it seems like you do like to dabble in a lot of different things. Have you guys made anything that's hasn't been released yet that's coming up that's a little bit different than your standard releases you have right now?
Yeah, probably what a lot of distilleries are playing with. So we're not like the only one, but we've got a single malt making and aging we haven't released yet, and we're actually aging it in our bourbon barrels, to kind of give it that kind of style, if you will, versus a new charred oak aging. And it's a all 100% Kentucky grown and malted barley, but the mash is made up of a few different varietals from the same maltster, South Fork Malt House in Cynthiana, Kentucky. That's where we get all of our malted barley from, and it's kind of like an amber beer mash for that specific malt, or for that, I'm sorry, that recipe. So it's going to be, amber beer mash, bourbon barrel. That's kind of the idea with this one, and we'll see how it progresses because we've only been doing it a few years, and of course we all know it takes a few years to develop, get the stuff kind of flowing the right way. So we should have something out that, but we play with a lot of stuff, whether it's finishing in barrels, one-off recipes. We have a mash bill that myself and someone else is responsible for because we made a mistake on a day when we were supposed to be, overseeing and running the distillery, made a mistake on our grain weights, and now we have a one-off mash kind of thing. So sometimes it happens on accident.
It's like Bob Ross. It's a happy little accident, right?
Yeah. No,
so I got a question with your I don't want to presume love of Scotch, but you like Scotch. Have you thought about trying to see what happens with your dark fired whiskey in a Scotch barrel?
Well, that was kind of the idea with the dark fired whiskey being in the bourbon barrel, is it kind of, being like a Kentucky Scotch, but it's more, I would say the fun part of that would be getting the Scotch barrel, because I have not seen, I'm sure you could get Scotch barrels, but I haven't seen the ability to get them yet, at least in the resources that I have.
It's our pain to get, yes.
But I want to get a very good flavored, I mean, like heavy flavored scotch. We're talking something that's going to resonate real well.
The hemp bourbon as well.
That's right. I
mean,
forgot about that one. Yep. Hemp bourbon.
Patrick, you had that. Do you not remember it? You
No,
only had,
I
like,
did. I was
50
putting
drinks
up the
that
comment.
day.
Well, yeah, there was a few. I had a few that day.
That was
hemp
wild.
bourbon's, not
so
practical
weird.
to make as a product,
Oh, God.
at least in my opinion.
The amount of oil that hemp seed has to
That's-
put out has got to just be disastrous.
30%, hemp seed is 30% oil.
Oh, God. That's just, that
Yeah.
hurts my body as somebody who's like, yeah.
And I think it's like 8% starch. So there's almost no starch whatsoever for you to do anything with.
I mean, the flavor comes through though, right? Like, I understand it kills
yeah.
your yield and your equipment, but the flavor is just absolutely bonkers. Like,
So I wouldn't know, or I'm not going to say how I would know. I'll say how I know. So driving through Colorado at one point, and you drive past a giant outdoor growth facility, that kind of smell is a similar smell that we had when we cooked the mash in there. I mean, it smelled like a grow house in the distillery when we were cooking it.
Did you have to have someone from the government there?
No, it's all legal hemp. It's
Okay, I just didn't.
less than 0.3% THC. That's the requirement for hemp. So Kentucky was actually one of the real pushers of legalized hemp. It had a real industry back in the day, World War II and before, and it was more of a grown crop. At that time, it was for rope, but there was a real push in Kentucky with the Department of Agriculture and some other folks involved. One of the first hemp growers in Kentucky was in Christian County, and that's who we bought our hemp seed from.
so I just want to say, Steve Pennington said he misses the dark fired rye, and I had no idea that exists.
That was a one-off.
Why do you tease us with these things?
Hey, at least you get
cruel.
to taste the experiments. I mean,
he does. I don't. I'm just some chump, right?
Hey, it's whenever you're there.
Yeah, we'll always have one or two things that are floating through our tasting room that, like right now, I'm not sure if we still have any hemp bourbon, but that was there not long ago. And then we've got the dark fired right now, and we'll do single mashes, one of these one-off recipes to kind of see what a certain ratio of grain or type of grain does.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. I don't know. I think I must be allergic to some of the pollen or something that's outside at the moment. I'm on my back porch and it's getting. I can tell I'm sounding worse as this is going on. So I think I'm gonna sip on. I'm gonna change my drink. By the way, what is everyone else sipping on the chat this evening? Well, what are you even having at home there? I know you poured something earlier. What did you end up pouring?
Well, since y'all have it, I've got Barker's Mill right here, which is our bottled and bond wheated bourbon.
There's a good one.
And ironically, I don't drink this one as much as others. It's just I'm not as much of, I guess being from Louisiana, I need that spice. I like rye in my bourbon versus wheat if I have the choice. So I like getting that little, cinnamon zing in there a little bit.
Are you mostly just a straight whiskey person, or are you a cocktail person too?
Mostly, most of the time, if I drink a cocktail, I want one, and that's kind of want to keep drinking cocktail after cocktail or anything. But yeah, for the most part, I like whiskey neat. During the summertime when it gets real hot, my kind of new favorite thing to do if I call it my beer, because it's kind of like a beer to me, is basically make a bourbon seltzer with a few ounces of bourbon, and then I'll put it in like a frosted glass and then sparkling water or club soda, and that's it. I don't like putting anything else in it. And it's like sipping on this, bourbon seltzer, nice and refreshing. Slows you down if you're trying to be good and responsible and all that good stuff.
Sometimes you need that. There's nothing. we'll encourage that every now and then. Sometimes you got to have that nice drink that does that. So everyone's life goes too fast. Right? Like Ferris Bueller, you got to slow down every now and then.
That's right. Well, part of it too for us is most of our stuff is barrel proof. So, I've learned to the best way to enjoy and be a custodian of barrel proof bourbon over the years. Let's say it that way.
In general, I think most of us would agree with you that we're at least higher the proof you're usually not afraid of. You get a lot more flavors out of them. Though on this show, we have come across a few things that after trying with a higher proof and a lower proof, it was like, I guess 46 was the right one. Good choice, but for the most of the time, I'll take the little bit of heat to get a little more flavor coming out at like barrel strength a lot of times. Just, I don't know, just seems richer to me.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Well, I mean, when it's 90 proof or 95 proof or whatever it is, and people say, I'm going to add water to open it up. And my thought is always, why? They've already added a whole bunch for you. You don't really need, any more water. It's not going to change it that much.
I think I looked at someone, I was like, well, if it goes below 40, I'm not sure if it's a whiskey anymore. just saying. Go ahead, Mitch. Sorry.
So I got to ask a question, because the thing that got me interested in MB Roland like years ago, before I even kind of really knew, where y'all were or anything, was on y'all's label. It says still and barrel proof. So I'm pretty sure most folks know what barrel proof is, right? But could you go into the what still and barrel proof means?
So the still and barrel proof is going away because we actually have stopped doing that a few years ago. The idea when we did still proof was it was off the still, went straight into the barrel for aging, and it would be, bottled at proof. And what we found when we were filling barrels at different barrel entry proofs, the lower the proof, you're going to get a little bit more of a, better aging flavor that you get, on that product. It just develops a little bit better. And of course, historically, that stuff was pretty much put into the barrel at 110 or below, and we were putting it at the highest 110, but as low as around 105 or so on certain barrel fillings. And we realized, that lower barrel entry proof really does make the product better. And so we started cutting our actual distillate down to around 102, 103, depending on the exact product that it goes into the barrel for now. And so we're not doing still proof anymore. That was what it was. It was off the still into the barrel. But, we're adding completely neutral water to it. So it's not like it's really changing the product or anything like that, like you would do if you were to add it to whiskey after it comes out of the barrel.
Low entry proofs are great, right? Like sugar is water soluble. Everybody likes sugar. The more water in a barrel, the more sugar you get. So big fan. Sorry. I'm drinking a single barrel rye right now that, oh my God. Wow. So good.
Ours is meant to be flavorful. That's what it's developed to be. It's not meant to be a nice, light little, tap you on the shoulder bourbon. It's meant to be, really give you some flavor, some viscosity in the mouth. The oils, everything's still there. One of the cool things I like showing people when I pour whiskey with our whiskey is the drip marks on the bottle. You can see the little, shadow drip marks that come down. That's from the oils that we don't take out of the whiskey when you chill filter.
So I got a question for you. When you started to be able to sell online, when the Great Commonwealth decided it was actually a good idea for you to do that, how soon did that really start taking off for you? And then did you find that you were seeing a totally different customer that was getting your stuff, or some of the regulars that were coming to the distillery that were picking things up?
Well, a lot of our retail for the distillery that you would call regulars or locals live in Tennessee. So they can't purchase product online, but most of them are close enough where it really doesn't matter if they're going to, come over here. But we did see a little bit of sales going on with Kentucky proper, because that's really where we can only ship right now directly, and it's still something that we're kind of developing, just because it's kind of a getting used to process, marketing it the right way. And in some cases, when has a certain level of success, you're going to want to have potentially a third party help you out with it if need be. So we're trying to be realistic with online sales and not let that get away from us too quickly. And because really we can only focus on Kentucky as far as directly from the distillery, there's not a lot of people in Kentucky, compared to Texas or New York or Florida or places like that. So, we've got more barrels aging in Kentucky than people.
That's probably for the best, to be 100% honest. I've met a lot of people, and I've met a lot of bourbon, and I liked a lot more of the bourbon than I did the people, if I'm 100% honest.
It's a little telling, but that's okay, bitch.
Common ingredient, right? Like, that's probably the issue.
Mm.
Well, Mary Beth would get along with you. Let's put it that
way. Thanks. I hope. So I kind of have another random question. So y'all have the Kentucky Azul now, and you have the Extra Añejo, which I drank today because it is fantastic. What made you think, that you wanted to do a, what do you have to call it here in America, an agave spirit?
Well, it was doing some marketing for us, for MB Roland, and going out to California and Las Vegas and other places, out west, where a typical liquor store looks a little different than it does over here. And, they'll have, in some of these stores, they'll have aisles of tequila and mezcal and agave spirits, sotol, other things like that, I never even would begin to find or see over here, just like we've got bourbon and whiskeys over here that I'm sure they can't get or see over there. And just looking through all of it, and I've always been a tequila fan. I've never made the mistake of doing shots of whiskey or tequila. I think that's why I'm such a good, person for this business, because I got into it sipping, not shooting. And even to this day, Mary Beth, because she fell into that category of doing tequila shots, she will taste and she will appreciate our agave, but she will probably not pour a full pour and drink it for the most part, just because tequila has that twangy, kind of funk flavor. And if you've had problems with tequila, then that, I guess, resonates and sticks within you. But I'm looking at these different products going, this is amazing. This is great. Can we get agave and do this? And of course, I already knew there was other distilleries in America making agave spirits, but was thinking about it more from the concept of a way to bridge to our bourbon, because what we do with our agave that really kind of resonates the flavor or creates the flavor that you get with it is we are aging our agave. We buy the agave, we distill it here, but then when we fill a barrel, it is literally one that was just dumped and then tilted back up, and it's still got juice sloshing in there, probably. And so we're filling very, very wet barrels whenever we fill really anything, but especially on this agave product. So it takes no time for that bourbon flavor to develop. And so most of our regular agave is about 6 months to a year old. And then, of course, the extra añejo that you have is 3 years old. But it's a healthy amount of bourbon in there because of filling with a wet barrel. And we don't make a huge amount. It's kind of like the brandy. We make it a few times a year, and it's a good thing, whether it's brandy, agave, the different whiskeys. Our distillers are pretty versed when it comes to making different products and recipes because we do tackle a lot of different things.
Hold on. Kevin wants to know if the agave product is on the shelf now.
Here for us,
in Kentucky, I was going to say he's within driving distance.
Yes, it should. No, it should be in Kentucky. You should be able to get the Kentucky Azul, is what we call it, the Reposado.
I know Westport Whiskey and Wine has the Reposado. I'm not sure about the extra añejo.
No, they're not going to have the extra añejos only at the distillery, unfortunately.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
Oh, unfortunately. Oh, yeah. You have to go down there and hang out and try all the rest of the stuff. What a terrible, terrible thing.
Have a cocktail and a tour.
Oh, and I was going to say from your distillery is one of the ones that, or I should say, is another one of the distilleries we really like because of the entire lineup that you're putting out. Not just one or two whiskeys. Your entire lineup is really good. Everyone has a different high point for things with it, but it's a really nice set. No matter how you're going to pour it for people, it's a really nice journey that people are going to have with 4 or 5 whiskeys where with a lot of us, we've gone to places where you can tell out by the time you get to the 4th that number 2 was the winner, and that's probably going to be the winner of everything, which is, at least there is a winner. But I mean, to have being able to play like a whole playlist of good music is phenomenal. So I want to congratulate you on that, because it's not just one product. Everything you guys are doing is of really good quality. I feel like I stepped on Mitch. Did I step in your territory for praising him for a second?
I mean,
I sat back like this. I thought I was in trouble.
No, I have a bad back because I have horrible posture and I'm lazy. But I mean, I am an unabashed fanboy, right? Like, you don't come onto a show wearing the distiller's shirt and just be like, I'm kind of okay. I'm lukewarm about it. Like, big fan. So, whatever.
Thank you.
But I'll say I went down with my girlfriend who's in the chat, and today's our anniversary. So, like, the fact that she's here talking about how good MB Roland is and not like texting me about what a terrible person I am for cutting our anniversary short to do this says how much she also likes MB Roland, right? And how great of a person she is. I love you, babe. We went there and we went through the tasting, right? And the problem was we wanted to try so much that, we were like sipping each other's like, ooh, that was really good. How many sips can we like trade back and forth from each of these samples? So it was a blast.
Yeah, if I'm given a tasting, which isn't that often, like I'm so removed from the tasting room at this point, I have to ask other people to help me with a lot. I can't check people out, nothing like that. So if I'm given a tasting, I just look at someone and I say, so you're going to get 4, and just let me know what you want, but realize you're going to get 4. So when I ask you how many you want, you're just going to get 4. You're not going to get 4, but you'll get a different number. But that's what I tell people, because that's our policy.
If you leave here, the answer
I don't
to
know
the
how to ring
question
you
is
up.
4.
I don't even know how to ring you up anyway, so I can't. How am I supposed to? Yeah. So if you ever come to the distillery and you see me behind the tasting bar, I'm getting a tasting from him. But I will check your ID. Well,
I had you on for about an hour here, but I didn't mention it earlier, but we were originally going to have Mudcat on, and I want you to talk about him a little bit, but I want to give him a cheers and hope he starts feeling better, because he did have a little accident, which is why he wasn't here. But I know there was a couple of people in the chat mentioning it. How did you run into him, and how did he end up coming to the distillery for you?
So Mudcat has been here 6 years and some change now. And he got here when he retired from the Army. He had his retirement party at the distillery. And basically, he had his retirement party at the distillery, and he never stopped because he kept coming back to hang out. We said, well, if you keep coming back, we're going to give you a job, And so we had him hired. I can't remember if we had him hired before his retirement party or right after it. I frankly can't remember. But it was very quick that we had him hired, and he's been hilarious. Now, he's grown his beard out like crazy. You would never know that he was in the Army if you saw him now. He got a big old, Gandalf beard or something like that. And
kind of similar to Mike's, but bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was on his motorcycle about 7 weeks ago, and it was luckily not a very crazy accident, but he sputtered out, however you want to say it, on some sand, and gently laid his motorcycle down. His motorcycle is fine, has a little scratch or two, nothing crazy, but his leg was under it. And let's just say that he's got some hardware in his leg now, and he's getting better. He's been out here a few times. He's coming out tomorrow, but ironically, I had a very similar leg injury. We had the same surgery. I had it 2 years ago, and it'll take a minute for him to be walking 100% right. I can speak from experience, but he's on the downhill slope because he's at least, past all the surgery and all that fun stuff. But he had a real good one. I mean, it was a full, leg break, bones through the skin, all that fun, not trying to get anyone sick while they're drinking whiskey or anything like that. But it was, he had a fun experience. Let's put it that way.
So, but we're just hoping he gets better quick, because I'm sorry. I love people at distilleries when you have a name like that. That's fantastic. Or a nickname that almost supersedes your name when you're there. That's great.
Well, if Mudcat's one of those guys, sorry for the light.
No worries.
Another beverage over here. Mudcat's one of those guys where when you meet him, you'll never see 6'5", and with his big beard and everything like that, and his personality definitely fits. But the reality is we've had so many mics over the years work at the distillery that, in fact, we've got 2 mics. No, we've got 3 mics working at the distillery right now, Mudcat being one of them. Well, he kind of already used that name a little bit for a nickname, and we said, well, you're getting that full time now because it's getting too confusing saying Mike, and no one knows what Mike is talking about.
So when I worked at the cooperage, I think we had 10 mics on second shift, and the joke was if you needed help, you just yelled Mike, because one of them would be close, and then they'd come to help you.
Well, it makes it easier for names. I'll say that much.
Yeah. I'm sure HR loves it. Hey, this Mike
HR is
guy.
Mary Beth.
Yeah, well, good luck. Maybe that's why she likes bourbon so much. No,
Could be.
if I was HR, I don't think I would ever be sober. So, more power to her.
I think that goes against HR policy.
Yeah, it's kind of can't, but I mean,
if you're HR, right, you get to make the policy. Hopefully,
Well, that's true.
So, but
Well, Mary Beth's driving up right now. Look at that.
but I don't know. Like we said, we usually don't like to keep people on too much longer than an hour or so, just because we know we're cutting into your evening and your personal time, and we want to say thank you for taking some time out of your day, which is your not just a work day, but your actually time when you get to relax, and we really appreciate it because we look at our show as more of like a distillery after dark or distillery. Like you're talking to people after the tour ended or after the distillery closed. It's a little more relaxed and not as high pressure with stuff. So thanks for taking time out of your day to help it feel like that. So
yes,
Cool.
thank you very much.
Well, thank y'all for having me. This has been one of the easiest Zoom meetings or style meetings I've ever done.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, well, we have some things coming up. We might talk to you again. I was gonna say there's a few things, and I'll be honest. When I first talked to you, and I know I told a couple people in chat, you guys actually thought you were coming up to Wisconsin to give a talk and what whiskeys do we need to bring, and I was like I don't want to ruin this. Like I could have you still come, but like that was not the plan. Like you don't have to show up. You can stay in Kentucky. I love the enthusiasm. I'm like, and I could put it together, but not right now. But I mean, in the future, I know there are plenty of people up here that really like the product, and it is unique enough compared to what we have here that it kind of stands out on its own. The white corn is just really nice and subtle comparatively.
Yeah.
Some of the other things, it puts a nice edge on stuff. It really does. So.
Well, I'm definitely going to make my way up to your way. At some point in my life, I do want to go to a Packers game just to,
I have access to tickets. We have our own tickets. My sister has my other family tickets. So I can tell people, if you want to come down, it's something that we can make happen because it's
awesome.
It's a fun time to go up there. They have kind of changed it a little bit, but I was gonna say it's still pretty neat, and going to a game is fun. But I'll be honest, I was there when they weren't very good, so seeing the transition to where they are good is kind of unique because I went when the best thing about the game in the 80s was the cheap hot dogs and the Wisconsin marching band afterwards that my dad would make me stay to watch. So hold it a little bit different feel now, and it's a little more exciting than when I was younger.
Yeah, they got a few more bucks running through that place now, I'm sure.
Oh, we call it Lambeau World. The little area they basically bought like a couple of streets down the way and kind of renovated it, and they own it, and like a lot, kind of like Jerry World, very similar type thing where you own a lot of property that makes you money besides the stadium as well too, and it is really cool. I'm not going to deny that. It's a nice setup, and I enjoy having it in town. But yeah, so if you do ever get a chance, we'll talk about that you getting here at some point because it's a fun experience. So, all right, well, everyone. Next week we're having Gary from Woodhead on because his old blue corn was part of last week's blind corn tasting as well. So we'll be talking to him again next week. Make sure you stop in there for that. If you haven't, try to get a hold of some MB Roland. And if you don't remember, there's mules about that can make all sorts of things happen. Just get in contact with them. Things can get from point A to point B without an issue. But like we were saying, Mike, Mitch, thanks for being here. Paul, really big thank you for coming on again. It was a tremendous show. We really enjoy your products and can't wait to maybe get down there the next time we're in Kentucky. I know I want to next time I'm down there. So
Anytime, y'all just let me know.
All right. Well, remember, it's not the size of the den that matters, it's the love of whiskey. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
What?